2 weeks ago, I sat in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old sedan, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The heater was rattling, fighting a losing battle against the late October chill that seeped through the windows. Outside, the landscape of upstate New York was a blur of gray skies and stripped trees, skeletal fingers reaching up towards nothing. It was the kind of day that made you want to curl up with a hot tea and forget the world existed, but I didn't have that luxury. I was summoned. I'm Rowan Hart, 34 years old, and technically, I was driving to my grandfather's estate for a memorial dinner. But anyone who knew my family knew we didn't do grief. We did business. My grandfather, Silas Blackwood, had passed away 3 months ago. 3 months of silence from the main house, followed by a sudden, urgent email from my mother, Cynthia. The subject line hadn't been "We miss you" or "Let's honor Dad." It was simply, "Attendance mandatory. Estate settlement." The engine of my car coughed as I navigated the winding roads leading up to Blackwood Estate. I patted the dashboard affectionately. This car was a piece of junk, sure, but it was mine. I paid for every repair, every oil change, and every gallon of gas with money I earned restoring water-damaged manuscripts and binding antique books. My family called it Rowan's little hobby. I called it survival. Contrasting my life with my destination was almost laughable. Blackwood Estate was a sprawling stone fortress that had stood for over a century. It projected power, wealth, and a cold kind of permanence. Growing up there, I learned early on that I was a guest in my own home. The permanent residents were my parents' egos and my sister's achievements. Kendra. Just thinking her name made my jaw tight. My sister, the golden child. 3 years older, a corporate lawyer with a sharp suit for every day of the week and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. To my mother, Kendra was the sun. I was just the shadow that occasionally got in the way. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No makeup, hair pulled back in a practical bun, a thrifted black dress that I'd done my best to tailor. I looked nothing like them. I looked tired. But beneath the fatigue, there was something else today. A simmering, quiet anger. For the last 3 months, I hadn't heard a peep from my parents, Garrett and Cynthia. I knew why. They were busy. They were busy meeting with appraisers, real estate agents, and liquidation firms. I knew this not because they told me, but because the town we lived in was small, and gossip traveled faster than light. The rumor was that the Blackwood fortune was massive, somewhere in the ballpark of $15 million, and my parents were already spending it in their heads. My father, Garrett, had likely already picked out a new yacht. He was a man who had never worked a hard day in his life, riding on the coattails of my mother's family name, smiling vacantly while she made the ruthless decisions. And Cynthia? She probably had a list of charities she wanted to donate to, just to see her name on a plaque, before using the rest to fund Kendra's partner track buy-in at her firm. Me? I was the scapegoat. The reliable spare. The one who was expected to show up, nod, sign whatever piece of paper they put in front of me, and then disappear back into the woodwork. But as the iron gates of Blackwood loomed into view, rising out of the mist like the teeth of a trap, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. They thought I was coming here to mourn. They thought I was coming here to beg for scraps. They didn't know that I had already done my mourning. I had mourned Silas every day for the last 90 days. I mourned him in the quiet of my small apartment. I mourned him when I walked past the park bench where we used to sit. I wasn't here for them. I was here to see this through for him. I slowed the car, rolling down the window to punch in the gate code. It hadn't changed. 1942. The year Silas was born. The heavy gates groaned open, slow and reluctant, as if warning me to turn back. I didn't listen. I shifted into gear and drove up the long, gravel driveway. The gravel crunched under my tires, sounding like bones breaking. "Okay, Rowan," I whispered to the empty car. "Showtime." Parking my battered sedan next to Kendra's gleaming white Range Rover felt like a deliberate act of rebellion. Her car was pristine, detailed to perfection, looking like it had just rolled off a showroom floor in Beverly Hills. Mine had a dent in the rear bumper from a parking lot hit and run 2 years ago that I never had the cash to fix. The visual metaphor was so heavy-handed it almost made me laugh. I barely had one foot on the gravel before the front door swung open. It wasn't a warm welcome. It was an inspection. My mother, Cynthia, stood in the doorway. She was wearing a black dress that cost more than my annual rent, accessorized with pearls that I recognized from Grandma's collection, pearls that were supposed to be in the safe deposit box. Her hair was a helmet of blonde perfection, sprayed into submission. "Rowan," she said. It wasn't a greeting, it was an acknowledgement of a nuisance. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on my shoes. They were sensible flats, not heels. "You look like a librarian attending a funeral for a cat." "Hello to you too, Mother," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's good to see you. How are you holding up?" She waved her hand dismissively, the diamond on her finger catching the dull light. "Oh, don't start with the sentimentality. We have a schedule." The appraisers took longer than expected with the silver collection, and the caterers are setting up in the dining room. We're behind. "Appraisers?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "I thought this was a memorial dinner." "It is," she snapped, turning her back on me and walking into the foyer. "But we have to be practical. Your father and I have a responsibility to manage the estate. We can't let things sit around collecting dust just because you want to be emotional." I followed her inside. The house smelled different. It used to smell like old paper, pipe tobacco, and floor wax, the scent of Silas. Now, it smelled of chemical cleaner and expensive catering trays. The hallway was cluttered with boxes. I glanced at one, it was labeled Auction House, Lot 4B. They weren't just managing the estate. They were gutting it. My father, Garrett, emerged from the living room holding a tumbler of scotch. It was 2 in the afternoon. He offered me a weak, lopsided smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked softer around the middle than I remembered, his face puffy. "Hey, kiddo," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. He took a sip of his drink. "Traffic okay?" "Fine, Dad," I said. "Where's Kendra?" "She's on a call." "Important client," Cynthia interjected, adjusting a vase of flowers on the console table. "She took the day off to be here, Rowan. She's sacrificing billable hours to help us sort through this mess. You should be grateful." "Grateful," I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. "Right." I walked past them into the main living area. The furniture had been rearranged. The comfortable armchairs where Silas used to read were pushed against the wall to make room for high-top tables. It looked less like a home and more like a hotel lobby preparing for a corporate mixer. Strangers in black suits, the appraisers, I assumed, were walking around with clipboards, tagging items. I saw a yellow tag on the grandfather clock. A yellow tag on the oil painting of the valley. "What is the total valuation?" I asked, cutting through the noise. Cynthia paused. She exchanged a look with Garrett. A look that said, "How much do we tell her?" "The preliminary assessment for the real estate and the primary assets," Cynthia said, her voice dropping to a whisper as if discussing a state secret, "is roughly $15.5 million. That doesn't include the liquid cash in the accounts." $15.5 million. The number hung in the air. I saw the greed in her eyes, a naked, hungry look that made my stomach turn. They weren't seeing the home where I learned to walk. They weren't seeing the history of the Blackwood family. They were seeing a number on a check. "That's a lot," I said neutrally. "It's a burden," Cynthia corrected, though she didn't sound burdened. She sounded exhilarating. "The taxes alone will be a nightmare if we don't handle this correctly. That's why we need to talk tonight. We need unity, Rowan. We need everyone on the same page." Unity, I thought. That was Cynthia speak for compliance. "I'm going to the library," I said abruptly. I needed to get away from them, from the tags, from the smell of greed. "Don't be long," Cynthia called after me. "Mr. Abernathy is arriving at 4. We start promptly." I didn't answer. I walked down the long corridor, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, observing the pillaging of my sanctuary. But as I reached for the brass handle of the library door, I remembered the weight of the key in my pocket, not a physical key, but a metaphorical one. A secret I had carried for 3 months. They thought I was the one who needed to get on their page. They had no idea I had already written the book. The library was the only room in the house that hadn't been invaded by the yellow tags yet. I closed the heavy oak door behind me, and the silence washed over me like a physical embrace. This room was a cathedral of books, with floor-to-ceiling shelves that smelled of vanilla and dust. It was here, in this room, that Silas and I had spent our evenings while my parents were out at galas and Kendra was away at law school. I walked over to the large mahogany desk near the window. It was clear of papers now, sanitized of his presence, but I could still see him there in my mind's eye. My memory pulled me back to last winter. It was a brutal season, with snow piling up 5 feet high against the walls. My parents and Kendra had flown to Aspen for a ski trip, a networking vacation, as Kendra called it. They didn't invite me. They said someone needed to stay behind to watch the house and keep an eye on Grandpa. I didn't mind. In fact, I preferred it. One evening in late January, the fire was crackling in the hearth. Silas was sitting in his leather wingback chair, his hands resting on his knees. His Parkinson's had been getting worse, the tremors were constant now, making his handwriting illegible. "Rowan," he had said, his voice raspy but clear. "Come here, child." I sat on the ottoman at his feet. "Do you need your tea, Grandpa?" "No," he said. "I need your hands. Mine have betrayed me." He gestured to the desk. Lying there was a plain, cloth-bound journal. It looked like something you'd buy at a corner store for $5, completely unremarkable. "I need to catalog the estate," he said. "My memory is getting foggy, and I want to make sure everything is accounted for. The furniture, the land, the debts, the favors. I want you to write it down for me. Can you do that? Be my scribe?" "Of course," I said. I thought it was busy work. I thought he just wanted to feel useful, to feel like he was still in control of his domain. For the next 2 months, that became our ritual. Every night, I would sit at the desk with a fountain pen, and he would dictate. "Item, the Victorian settee," he would say. "Purchased in 1922. Upholstery ruined by Cynthia's poodle in 2005. Never repaired." I wrote it down, smiling at his bluntness. "Item, the orchard on the South Hill," he continued. "Neglected by Garrett despite my instructions to prune. Yield is down 40%. It felt like a diary of grievances at first. But then, the tone shifted. He started dictating longer passages, paragraphs that sounded less like an inventory and more like a narrative. To my daughter Cynthia, he dictated one snowy Tuesday. "Who sees this house not as a shelter, but as a bank vault? The value she places on things is the only value she understands." I paused, the pen hovering over the paper. "Grandpa, should I really write this? This sounds personal." Silas looked at me, his blue eyes sharp and lucid. "Write it, Rowan. Exact words. The hand that writes history is the hand that builds the future. Don't change a syllable." So I wrote. I wrote pages and pages in my neat, calligraphic script. I wrote about money loaned to Kendra for a condo she sold for a profit she never shared. I wrote about the time Garrett invested $50,000 of Silas's money in a sure-thing tech startup that went bust in a week. I wrote until my fingers cramped. I thought I was just his therapist, his confessor. I thought this journal was just a way for him to vent his frustrations before he died. I never once suspected that I was drafting a legal document. Back in the present, I ran my hand over the smooth wood of the desk. I remembered the last entry. It was the night before the family returned from Aspen. And finally, Silas had whispered, looking out the window at the falling snow. To Rowan. Who stayed when others left? Who listened when others talked? The amanuensis. He hadn't explained what the word meant. I looked it up later. Amanuensis, a literary or artistic assistant, in particular one who takes dictation or copies manuscripts. The door to the library creaked open, snapping me out of the memory. I turned to see Mr. Abernathy standing there. He was an older man, stooped and gray, wearing a tweed suit that had seen better days. He held a battered leather satchel against his chest like a shield. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, his professional mask slipped. He offered me a small, sad smile. "Miss Hart," he said softly. "It is good to see you." "Mr. Abernathy," I nodded. "Are they ready?" "They are impatient," he corrected. "There is a difference." He stepped into the room and lowered his voice. "Are you ready, Rowan? For what happens tonight?" I looked at the empty chair where Silas used to sit. I felt the phantom weight of the pen in my hand. "I don't know," I admitted. "They seem very confident. They have appraisers. They have plans." Mr. Abernathy tapped the side of his leather bag. "Plans are brittle things, my dear. They break easily under the weight of truth." "Rowan." My mother's shrill voice echoed from the hallway. "Mr. Abernathy." "We are waiting." Mr. Abernathy straightened his tie. The kindness vanished from his face, replaced by the stony expression of a lawyer about to go to war. "After you," he said. The dining room had been transformed. The long mahogany table, which usually seated 12, was set for 5. But instead of a family dinner, it looked like a board meeting. There were carafes of water, not wine. There were legal pads at every place setting except mine. Cynthia sat at the head of the table, Silas's seat. That alone made my blood boil. She had assumed the throne before the body was even cold. Garrett sat to her right, acting as her lieutenant. And to her left sat Kendra. Kendra had finally graced us with her presence. She was wearing a pro-grey power suit that likely cost more than my car. Her hair was sleek, her makeup flawless. She was typing furiously on her phone, not even looking up when Mr. Abernathy and I entered. Finally, Kendra muttered, tossing her phone onto the table. "I have a flight to London tomorrow night. Let's make this quick." "Hello, Kendra," I said, pulling out the chair at the far end of the table, the lowest position. She glanced at me, her eyes flicking over my thrifted dress. "Hey, Ro. You look comfortable." "We are all here," Cynthia announced, clasping her hands on the table. "Mr. Abernathy, please sit." She gestured to a chair set slightly apart from the table, isolating him. It was a power move. She was establishing that he was an employee, not a participant. Mr. Abernathy sat slowly, placing his satchel on the floor between his feet. "Thank you, Mrs. Hart. Shall we proceed to the reading of the last will and testament of Silas Blackwood?" "In a moment," Cynthia said, raising a hand. "Before we get into the legalese, we, the family, have discussed some matters." She looked at Garrett, then at Kendra. They all nodded. A united front. I was the only one out of the loop. "Rowan," Cynthia turned her gaze on me. It was the look a predator gives a wounded animal. "We know this is overwhelming for you. You have your little life, your book hobbies. You aren't equipped to deal with the complexities of an estate this size. Taxes, maintenance, investment portfolios, it's a lot of math." "I can do math, Mother," I said dryly. "It's not just math, it's strategy," Kendra chimed in, leaning forward. "Look, Ro. The market is volatile right now. We need to liquidate certain assets immediately to cover the inheritance tax, or we lose everything. Mom and Dad have a plan to consolidate the holdings into a trust managed by my firm." "And?" I asked. And, Cynthia continued, reaching for a folder in front of her. We want to make sure you are taken care of, without you having to worry about the burdens of ownership. We want to keep this simple. Private. Within the family. She slid the folder down the long table. It spun across the polished wood and stopped right in front of me. What is this? I asked, not opening it yet. It's a waiver, Garrett said, his voice trying to sound reassuring but coming out weak. A standard agreement. It says that you agree to let your mother and I execute the estate decisions without interference. In exchange, we've set up a generous stipend for you. A stipend, I repeated. Like an allowance for a child. $2,000 a month, Cynthia said proudly. For 5 years. That's more than enough to help with your rent situation. Plus, we will keep the guest cottage available for you to visit on holidays. Assuming, of course, you give us reasonable notice. I looked at Mr. Abernathy. He was staring at the ceiling, his face unreadable. He couldn't intervene. Not yet. This was a family negotiation. So, I said, opening the folder. The document was thick. Deed of variation. Renunciation of executive rights. You want me to sign away my rights to the inheritance before I even know what the inheritance is? We are trying to protect you. Cynthia snapped, her patience fraying instantly. Do you have any idea how much it costs to heat this house? Do you know what the property taxes are? You restore old books for pennies, Rowan. You can't afford a new roof. We can. Kendra needs the liquidity for her buy-in, I said, connecting the dots. That's what this is, isn't it? You're selling the land to fund Kendra's partnership. Kendra flushed slightly. That's an investment in the family's future. My success lifts everyone up. And Dad, I looked at Garrett. You get the yacht? Garrett looked down at his hands. It's not about that, Rowan. It's about leadership. Blackwood needs leadership. The room felt small. The air was sucked out of it by their ambition. They were vultures, picking at the carcass before the funeral rites were even finished. They were so sure of their dominance. So sure that I was the weak link. I looked down at the paper. Sign here to renounce all claims. I picked up the pen lying on the folder. Cynthia's eyes widened in anticipation. Kendra smirked. They thought they had won. I held the pen, feeling its cool metal barrel against my fingers. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and expensive, my mother's style. It felt foreign compared to the scratched plastic fountain pen I used daily. $2,000 a month, I said slowly, testing the words. That's $24,000 a year. For 5 years. That's $120,000 total. It's tax-free, Kendra added quickly, her lawyer brain kicking in. We'll structure it as a gift. It's a great deal, Rowan. Honestly, it's more than you'd get if we let the estate go to probate and get eaten up by fees. And the estate is valued at $15.5 million, I continued, ignoring her. So you are offering me less than 1% of the value. In exchange for total control. Cynthia sighed, a loud, exaggerated sound of exasperation. Stop focusing on the big number, Rowan. You're not seeing the liabilities. The debt. The upkeep. You're seeing a lottery ticket, we are seeing a job. We are offering to do the job for you. You keep saying we, I said, looking at the document. But this paragraph here. The undersigned agrees to vacate any residence on the property within 30 days. You're kicking me out of the guest cottage? I thought you said I could visit. Visit, yes. Live, no, Cynthia said coldly. We're listing the guest cottage as a separate rental unit. Or maybe a studio for Kendra. We need to maximize revenue. You can't just crash there whenever you feel sentimental. Gaslighting. That was the word. They were twisting reality, making me feel like a squatter in my own home, a burden for existing. They wrapped their greed in the language of responsibility and protection. You don't think I'm capable, I stated. It wasn't a question. Oh, honey, Cynthia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. It's not about capability. It's about temperament. You're soft, Rowan. You always have been. You hid in the library while Kendra was out there winning debate championships. You fix broken things, Kendra builds new ones. That's just the way it is. We're playing to your strengths by letting you walk away. Walking away is a strength? I asked. Knowing your place is a strength, Cynthia replied sharply. The mask slipped again. There it was. Knowing my place. I looked at the document again. It was insulting. It was a slap in the face on paper before the real slap happened. But what hurt the most wasn't the money. It was the erasure. They wanted to erase my connection to Silas. They wanted to take the one place where I felt loved, Blackwood, and turn it into a liquidation sale. And if I don't sign? I asked. Kendra laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Don't be stupid, Ro. If you don't sign, we drag this out in court. Mom and Dad are the default next of kin. I'm a lawyer. I can tie this up in litigation for a decade. You'll bleed dry in legal fees before you see a dime. We're offering you a lifeboat. Take it. They had it all worked out. Good cop, Dad, though he was failing at it, bad cop, Mom, and the muscle, Kendra. I need a moment, I said, closing the folder. We don't have moments, Cynthia warned. Mr. Abernathy is waiting. I am in no rush, Mr. Abernathy spoke up from his corner. His voice was mild, but his eyes were sharp. Cynthia shot him a glare. Rowan, sign the paper. Don't make this ugly. We are family. Family. The word felt like a weapon. I turned my head to look directly at my father. Garrett Hart. The man who taught me how to ride a bike. The man who used to sneak me extra dessert when Mom wasn't looking. But also the man who stopped sneaking me dessert when Mom told him I was getting chubby at age 12. The man who stopped coming to my recitals because Cynthia needed him at her social events. Dad, I said softly. Do you agree with this? You want to ban me from Blackwood? You want to sell Grandpa's legacy? Garrett shifted in his seat. He picked up his scotch, realized it was empty, and set it down again. He looked at the tablecloth, tracing the pattern with a shaking finger. Rowan, sweetheart, he began, his voice cracking. Your mother, she has a vision. This place, it's too big. It's too much for us. And Kendra. Kendra has worked so hard. I worked hard too, Dad, I said. I took care of Grandpa. I was here every weekend. I was here when he fell in the garden. I was here when he forgot his own name. Where were you? That's enough, Cynthia slammed her hand on the table. Don't you dare guilt-trip your father. We have lives, Rowan. Important lives. We couldn't play nursemaid like you. That was your contribution. You did the caretaking, now let the adults handle the finances. Adults? I looked back at Garrett. Dad, please. Look at me. Tell me you think this is fair. Tell me you think Grandpa would want this. Garrett finally looked up. His eyes were wet. For a second, I thought he was going to stand up for me. I thought the father I remembered would break through the shell of the husband he had become. Just sign it, honey, he whispered. Please. Just, don't cause a scene. Your mother is very stressed. If you sign it, we can all go to dinner in the city. My treat. Okay? Just be a good girl. My heart broke. Not into two pieces, but into dust. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting his own peace. He was sacrificing me to the volcano of Cynthia's temper so he wouldn't get burned. He was the enabler in its purest form. He knew it was wrong, and he was doing it anyway. That was worse than Cynthia's malice. Malice I could understand. Cowardice was harder to forgive. Kendra checked her watch. Oh my God, this is exhausting. Dad's crying, Mom's yelling. Rowan, stop being a drama queen. It's a standard settlement. You get cash, we get the headache of the estate. Win-win. Sign the damn paper. She looked so bored. My pain was an inconvenience to her schedule. I looked at the three of them. The narcissist, the golden child, and the enabler. The unholy trinity of my childhood. I realized then that no amount of explaining, no amount of begging, no amount of fairness would ever penetrate their bubble. They created their own reality where I was the villain and they were the victims of my selfishness. I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt thin. No, I said. The word hung in the air, simple and heavy. Excuse me? Cynthia blinked, as if I had started speaking a foreign language. No, I said again, louder this time. I pushed the folder back across the table. It slid over the polished wood and stopped at the edge, dangerously close to falling off. I'm not signing it. Cynthia's face went through a spectrum of colors, pale, then red, then a terrifying shade of purple. You ungrateful little. She trailed off, her voice trembling with rage. We are offering you a gift. You have nothing. You live in a studio apartment above a bakery. You drive a car that looks like a soup can. And you turned down $100,000? 120, Kendra corrected automatically. It's not about the money, I said, standing up. My legs were shaking, but I forced them to hold me. It's about respect. And it's about the fact that you are lying. Lying? Garrett squeaked. We aren't lying. Yes, you are, I turned to my father. You said you might sell the estate. But I saw the email on the hallway table, Dad. The one from Sotheby's Realty. You've already accepted a preliminary offer for the land development rights. You're not just selling the house, you're selling the woods. You're letting them tear down the forest to build condos. The room went deadly silent. I had caught them. So? Cynthia stood up too, matching my height. It's prime real estate. Trees don't pay bills, Rowan. Progress does. Why are you so obsessed with this dusty old pile of rocks? It's an asset. That's all it is. It was Grandpa's life. I shouted. It was the first time I had raised my voice in that house in 10 years. He planted those trees. He built that library. He told me explicitly he never wanted the land broken up. He was senile. Cynthia screamed back. He was an old man who didn't understand the modern world. He held on to things that didn't matter. Just like you. He wasn't senile, I said, my voice dropping to a cold hiss. He was sharper than all of you combined. He saw you for what you are. That's why he didn't call you when he got sick. That's why he called me. He called you because you're cheap help. Kendra yelled from her seat. Because you have nothing better to do. Don't confuse exploitation with love, Rowan. He used you to wipe his chin, and now you think you deserve the crown? Get real. I deserve to be treated like a human being, I said, looking at Kendra. Not an inconvenience. Then act like an adult and sign the paper. Cynthia slammed her hand on the table, rattling the water glasses. I am your mother. I know what is best for you. You will ruin this. You will ruin everything just to feel special for 5 minutes. Obey me. I am 34 years old, I said, stepping back from the table. I don't have to obey you. And I definitely don't have to help you rob this estate. Rob? Cynthia's eyes bulged. It's OURS. It's my inheritance. I am his daughter. It belongs to me. Then let Mr. Abernathy read the will, I pointed to the lawyer. If it belongs to you, then the will says so. Why are you so afraid to let him read it? Why do you need me to sign a waiver if you're so sure you're the heir? That was the nail in the coffin. Logic. They hated logic. Cynthia moved. She moved faster than I thought possible in those heels. She rounded the corner of the table. She was in my face instantly, smelling of expensive perfume and rage. Her chest was heaving. You think you're smart? She spat. You think because you read a few books you understand how the world works? You are nothing, Rowan. You are a footnote in this family. A mistake. Cynthia. Garrett warned from his chair, half rising. Shut up, Garrett, she silenced him without looking. Her eyes were locked on mine. You will sit down. You will pick up that pen. And you will sign that paper. Or so help me God, I will make sure you never step foot in this town again. I will ruin your little reputation. I will have your shop condemned. Do not test me. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the lines of bitterness etched around her mouth. I saw the fear behind the anger, the fear of losing control, the fear of not having enough money to maintain her facade. No, I said. Calmly. Finally. I'm done being your doormat, Mom. I turned to leave. I was going to walk out, get in my car, and let them scream at the walls. But I didn't make it. She grabbed my arm, spinning me around. And then her hand connected with my face. It wasn't a movie slap. It was messy and hard. Her diamond ring caught my cheekbone, dragging across the skin. The sound was like a gunshot in the cavernous room. My head snapped to the side. A sharp, stinging pain exploded on my face, followed by a dull throb. I tasted copper in my mouth. Blood. I stumbled back, clutching my cheek. My eyes watered involuntarily from the shock. Mom. Kendra gasped. Even she was shocked. Garrett stood up fully now, his face pale. Cynthia. She made me do it. Cynthia screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She provoked me. Look at her. Standing there with that smug look. You have no other choice, Rowan. Do as you are told. The room fell into a terrified silence. The only sound was Cynthia's ragged breathing and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I slowly lowered my hand. My fingers came away red. I looked at the blood. Then I looked at my mother. I didn't cry. I didn't scream back. Something inside me, the last thread of attachment I had to these people, snapped. But it didn't break me. It freed me. You will never touch me again, I whispered. My voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. Cynthia looked at her own hand, then at me. She started to open her mouth, perhaps to justify it, perhaps to double down. But she was interrupted. Scrape. The sound of a heavy wooden chair dragging against the floorboards. We all turned. Mr. Abernathy had stood up. He looked taller than before. The mild-mannered, sleepy lawyer was gone. In his place stood the executor of the Blackwood estate, and he looked furious. He didn't look at Cynthia. He walked around the table, slow and deliberate, until he stood between my mother and me. He looked at the cut on my cheek, his expression softening for a moment, before turning his gaze on Cynthia. It was a look of pure, icy contempt. Mrs. Hart, he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it thundered with authority. Do you have any idea what you have just done? I was disciplining my daughter, Cynthia stammered, stepping back, her bravado faltering. It's a family matter. It is assault, Mr. Abernathy corrected. And it is witnessing coercion in the presence of legal counsel. We don't need to get technical, Kendra tried to intervene, sensing the shift in power. Oh, we are going to get very technical, Mr. Abernathy said. He reached down and picked up his leather satchel. He placed it on the table with a heavy thud. You wanted the will, Mr. Abernathy said, undoing the buckles. You wanted to know who owns this house. Who owns the land you want to sell? Who owns the chair you are standing next to? He reached inside. He didn't pull out a crisp white envelope with a wax seal. He pulled out a plain, cloth-bound journal. The cover was worn. The spine was cracked. I gasped. I recognized it instantly. It was the notebook from the snowy nights. What is that? Cynthia asked, frowning. Is that a diary? We're here for the will. This, Mr. Abernathy said, placing his hand reverently on the cover, is the last will and testament of Silas Blackwood. Dictated by him. Witnessed by me. He looked at Cynthia, then at Kendra, and finally rested his eyes on me. And do you know who actually wrote it? He whispered. Do you know whose handwriting determines your fate? The room went dead silent. Mr. Abernathy opened the book. Wow, things just got intense. That slap was absolutely uncalled for. Before we see what's written in that journal and how the tables turn, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, comment down below, what city are you watching from? I'd love to see where our community is from. Every comment helps this video reach more people. Thank you so much. Now, let's get back to the story. The silence in the dining room was heavy, suffocating. All eyes were glued to the cheap notebook in Mr. Abernathy's hands. It looked so out of place among the crystal glasses and silver platters, a relic of a different world. A diary? Kendra scoffed, the first to break the tension, though her voice lacked its usual bite. This is a joke, right? You're telling us Grandpa's legal will is a scribbled notebook? It is a holographic will, fully admissible in the state of New York, Mr. Abernathy corrected calmly, his fingers tracing the worn edge of the cover. Dictated by the testator, signed by the testator, and witnessed by a notary public, myself. But the physical act of writing, the transcription, that was done by an amanuensis. A what? Garrett asked, blinking rapidly. An amanuensis, Mr. Abernathy repeated, savoring the word. A literary assistant. Someone trusted to take dictation when the author's own hand fails them. Silas chose his amanuensis very carefully. He needed someone honest. Someone who wouldn't change his words to suit their own greed. He looked directly at Cynthia. He knew that if he hired a typist from the city, you might try to bribe them. He knew if he used a standard form, you might try to contest it based on his tremor, claiming he couldn't hold a pen. So he used a method that was intimate. Personal. Irrefutable. Mr. Abernathy turned the book around so they could see the open page. Recognize the handwriting, Mrs. Hart? Cynthia leaned in, squinting. Her face went pale as a sheet. She knew that handwriting. She had seen it on birthday cards I made her when I was 5. She had seen it on the grocery lists I wrote for the house. That's Rowan's writing, she whispered. Precisely, Mr. Abernathy said. Rowan wrote her own fate. And the irony, of course, is that she didn't know it. She sat with him night after night, faithfully transcribing his wishes, thinking she was cataloging furniture. She wrote the words that would strip you of everything, and she did it without changing a single comma. That is why this will is ironclad. It proves her integrity. I don't believe it, Kendra stammered. Let me see that. She reached for the book, but Mr. Abernathy pulled it back. I will read it. You will listen. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. His voice changed. It wasn't the lawyer speaking anymore, it was Silas. The cadence, the phrasing, it was my grandfather speaking from the grave. I, Silas Arthur Blackwood, being of sound mind and weary heart, do hereby declare this my last will. To my daughter, Cynthia, Mr. Abernathy read. Cynthia flinched. You have always loved this house. But you loved it for its shell, not its soul. You loved the parties you could host, the status it gave you. You treated it like a stage, and your family like props. I have watched you borrow money you never returned, $40,000 in 2018 for a business venture that was just a vacation, $60,000 in 2020 to cover your gambling debts in Atlantic City. That's a lie. Cynthia shrieked. I never. The debts are documented in the ledger in my safe, Abernathy continued reading, cutting her off. Because you have already taken your inheritance in the form of these unpaid loans, I leave you nothing. Not a single cent. Not a single brick. Cynthia collapsed into her chair, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. To my son-in-law, Garrett, the reading continued. A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. You stood by while my granddaughter was mistreated. Your silence was your choice. Therefore, silence is your inheritance. I leave you nothing. Garrett put his head in his hands. To my granddaughter, Kendra. You visited me 3 times in the last 2 years. Once to ask for a reference. Once to ask for a loan. And once to ask if I was done yet with the summer house so you could use it. You treat people like transactions. I am closing the account. I leave you nothing. Kendra's face was red, her fists clenched on the table. This is insane. He was clearly influenced. Rowan must have brainwashed him. Rowan didn't know what she was writing, Mr. Abernathy reminded her. She thought she was listing grievances. She didn't know the final clause. He turned the page. The paper rustled loudly in the quiet room. And finally, to Rowan. I held my breath. I remembered writing this part. I remembered crying while I wrote it, thinking it was just a sweet letter. Rowan, who knows the name of every tree in the orchard. Rowan, who fixed the spine of my first edition of Dickens when the glue failed. Rowan, who sat with me in the dark when the tremors were bad. You are the custodian of memory. You are the only one worthy of the future. Mr. Abernathy looked up at me. I leave the entirety of the Blackwood estate, including the house, the land, the investments, and the cash reserves, totaling $15,500,000, to Rowan Hart. Solely. Absolutely. The words hung there, shimmering like gold dust. Solely. Absolutely. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the money. It was the validation. Silas had seen me. He had seen everything. He had seen the bullying, the neglect, the quiet suffering. And he had planned this. He had planned this moment of absolute vindication. No, Cynthia whispered. No, no, no. There is one more thing, Mr. Abernathy said, his voice hardening. Silas knew you would be difficult. He knew you would try to fight this. So he added a clause. Paragraph 4. He read again, any beneficiary or family member who attempts to contest this will, or who harasses the primary heir, will immediately trigger the activation of the defense trust. What's a defense trust? Kendra asked sharply. It is a fund of $1 million, set aside specifically for legal fees to destroy anyone who challenges Rowan, Abernathy explained with a grim smile. And furthermore, if a challenge is made, the estate is instructed to immediately call in all outstanding debts from family members. That means, Cynthia, the $100,000 you borrowed over the years becomes due immediately. With interest. Cynthia looked like she had been slapped. The irony wasn't lost on me. So, Abernathy closed the book with a soft thump. You have 2 choices. You can walk away now, with your dignity, what's left of it, and 0 debt. Or you can sue, lose, and go bankrupt paying back what you owe. Silas left the choice to you. It was a masterstroke. It was checkmate from the grave. I looked at my mother. The woman who had just hit me. She looked small now. Defeated. The power she thought she held, the power of the parent, the power of the checkbook, had evaporated. Rowan, she said, her voice shaking. She tried to smile, a grotesque, watery imitation of affection. Rowan, baby. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't kick your own mother out. We can work this out. We can share. You don't need all this space. It's too big for one person. It's not too big, I said, my voice steady. It's just right. But family. Garrett started. Family doesn't hit family, I said, touching my cheek. Family doesn't try to trick their daughter into signing away her rights for pennies. Family doesn't leave their father alone to die while they go skiing. I stood up straighter. Mr. Abernathy, are we done? The reading is concluded, he nodded. The title transfer is already prepared. I just need your signature. Good, I said. Then I would like everyone to leave. Now. You can't be serious, Kendra stood up, knocking her chair over. It's 10 o'clock at night. Where are we supposed to go? You have a Range Rover, I said. Go to a hotel. Go to your apartment in the city. I don't care. Just get off my property. My property. The words tasted sweet. This is ridiculous. Cynthia screamed, her temper flaring again now that the shock was wearing off. I am not leaving my father's house. I grew up here. She lunged for the book on the table. Give me that. It's a fake. I'll rip it up. But she never reached it. A large hand intercepted her arm. Elias, the groundskeeper, stepped out of the shadows of the hallway. I hadn't even seen him come in. He was a mountain of a man, usually silent, usually invisible to people like Cynthia. But tonight, he was very visible. Mrs. Hart, Elias rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. I think it's time to go. Get your hands off me, you gardener. Cynthia spat. It's Mr. Vance to you, Elias said calmly. And Miss Rowan is the boss now. She said leave. Cynthia looked at Elias, then at Mr. Abernathy, and finally at me. She realized she was outnumbered. The staff, the lawyer, the law itself, everyone was on my side. She pulled her arm free, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. She looked at me with pure venom. You will regret this, she hissed. You think you've won? You're alone, Rowan. You have always been alone, and you will die alone in this cold, empty house. Nobody wants you. They only tolerated you because of us. I'd rather be alone in a cold house, I said, than warm in a nest of vipers. Let's go, Garrett muttered, tugging on Cynthia's arm. CYN, please. Let's just go. Don't touch me, she snapped at him, but she started walking. They filed out of the room. Cynthia, head held high but shaking with rage. Garrett, looking at the floor. Kendra, typing furiously on her phone again, probably calling her own partners to do damage control. I heard the front door open and slam shut. Then, the sound of engines starting. Then, the crunch of gravel fading into the distance. Silence returned to Blackwood Estate. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was light. It was breathable. I sank into the chair, Silas's chair at the head of the table. Mr. Abernathy smiled. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small tin. Throat lozenge? You did a lot of talking. I laughed. A real laugh. Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. For everything. Don't thank me, he said. Thank him. He patted the notebook. And get some rest, Rowan. Tomorrow is a new day. And there is one more thing you need to do. One more thing? Elias will show you in the morning, Mr. Abernathy said mysteriously. The job isn't quite finished. I woke up the next morning in the master suite. I hadn't planned to sleep there, but after everyone left, I couldn't bring myself to go back to the guest cottage. I needed to claim the space. I slept in the middle of the giant four-poster bed, surrounded by Silas's smell of old cedar and lavender. For the first time in my life, I didn't wake up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The sun was streaming through the heavy velvet curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I went downstairs. The kitchen was quiet. The caterers had packed up and left last night. There was a pot of coffee brewing. Elias must have been here already. I poured a cup and walked out onto the back terrace. The estate stretched out before me, acres of rolling lawn, the apple orchard, and beyond that, the dense forest that marked the property line. It was all mine. The realization was dizzying. Elias was down by the rose garden, pruning the bushes. When he saw me, he tipped his cap. He walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning, Miss Rowan," he said. "Sleep well?" "Like a log, Elias," I said. "Thank you for last night." "Dealing with my mother." "I've been wanting to do that for 20 years, he grinned. "She never tipped, you know. Not once at Christmas." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy iron key. It was old, rusted in spots, with a complex skeleton bit. "Mr. Silas told me to give you this," Elias said. He said, "Give it to her only after the vultures are gone." "What does it open?" I asked, taking the key. It was cold and heavy in my palm. "And this," Elias handed me a sealed envelope. It was addressed to me in Silas's shaky script. I tore it open. "My dearest Rowan, if you are reading this, you have survived the storm. I am proud of you. You have the house, but a house is just stone. I want to give you the heart. Take the key. Go to the East Woods. Look for Plotty. The path is overgrown, but you know the way. You used to play there as a child before your mother forbade you from going into the dirty woods. Go alone. And keep an open mind. Love, Grandpa." "Plotty?" I looked at Elias. "It's the old conservation lot," Elias said. "Way out past the creek. Nobody goes there." "I'm going," I said. I drank the rest of my coffee, pulled on my boots and a warm coat, and set off towards the tree line. The air was crisp, smelling of fallen leaves and damp earth. As I walked, I felt a sense of adventure I hadn't felt since I was a kid. What was out there? Treasure? A secret garden? The East Woods were dense. The path was barely visible, covered in years of undergrowth. I had to push aside brambles and climb over fallen logs. It felt like I was walking back in time, away from the manicured lawns of the estate into something wilder, more primal. After about 30 minutes of hiking, the trees began to thin. I stepped into a small, sun-dappled clearing. And there it was. It was a cottage. Not a shed, not a ruin, but a perfectly preserved stone cottage with a slate roof and smoke curling gently from the chimney. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, hidden away from the world. I walked up the stone path, my heart pounding. I knocked on the wooden door. After a moment, I heard footsteps. The door creaked open. Standing there was a woman. She was older, maybe 60, with wild gray hair tied back in a loose braid. She wore a thick wool sweater and gardening trousers covered in dirt. But it was her face that stopped me cold. She had Silas's eyes. The exact same piercing blue. And she had my nose. "Rowan," she said. Her voice was warm, like dry wood crackling in a fire. "I was wondering when you'd come." "Who are you?" I asked, though deep down, I already knew. "I'm Matilda," she said. "Your aunt?" "Aunt Matilda?" I blinked. "But Mom said you died." "She said you died in an accident in Europe 30 years ago." Matilda threw her head back and laughed. It was a rich, hearty sound. "Of course she did. Cynthia loves a tragic story. It's much cleaner than the truth." "Which is?" "Come in," she said. "Tea is hot." I entered. The cottage was cozy, filled with dried herbs hanging from the rafters, stacks of books, and botanical drawings pinned to the walls. It felt more like a home than the big house ever did. Over steaming mugs of herbal tea, Matilda told me the missing chapter of the Blackwood history. "I didn't die," she said. "I committed a sin. I fell in love with a jazz musician. A black man. And I decided I wanted to study botany instead of marrying the banker your grandmother picked out for me. So they disowned you? I asked, horrified. Cynthia did. Your grandmother did, Matilda said. But Silas was different. He was torn. He was a weak man back then, Rowan. He couldn't stand up to his wife. So he made a compromise. A cowardly one, but a loving one. She gestured around the room. He built me this place. Hidden on the edge of the estate. He deeded the land to a shell company so no one would know. He supported me. He visited me every Tuesday for 30 years. We would walk in the woods. He knew my husband before he passed. He knew my life. He knew you were here the whole time? I whispered. And he never told me? He wanted to, Matilda said. But he was afraid. Afraid that if Cynthia knew, she would burn this place down. Or forbid you from coming to the estate at all. He sacrificed the truth to keep us both safe. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her hands were rough, calloused, just like mine. He told me about you, Rowan. Every week. He told me about your bookbinding. About how you were the only one with a soul in that house. He wanted us to meet, but only when you were free. Only when you were the mistress of Blackwood. I own the estate now, I said. The whole thing. I know, Matilda smiled. And that means you own this land too. So, landlord, are you going to evict me? Tears pricked my eyes. No. Never. Good, she squeezed my hand. Because we have work to do. Silas left us a job. The orchard needs pruning. The invasive ivy is killing the oaks. And I think the big house needs some life in it. I looked at this woman, my flesh and blood, hidden away like a shameful secret just because she dared to be herself. I realized then that my inheritance wasn't just money. It was her. It was the chance to have a real family. I have a lot of questions, I said. We have time, Matilda said. But first, I think you have visitors. She pointed out the window. Through the trees, down in the valley towards the main gate, I could see a cloud of dust. A black SUV was speeding towards the entrance. They're back, I said, my stomach tightening. Go, Matilda said. Finish it. Close the gate. I ran back to the main house. By the time I got my car and drove down to the main gate, the SUV was there. It was parked just outside the iron bars. It wasn't my parents' car. It was a lawyer's car. A sleazy-looking man in a cheap suit was standing next to Garrett. Cynthia was in the passenger seat, refusing to get out. Kendra was leaning against the hood, arms crossed. I stopped my car on the inside of the gate. I didn't open it. I got out and walked up to the bars. Lost something? I asked. Open the gate, Rowan, Kendra said tiredly. This is Mr. Sykes. He's representing us. We need to talk. I have a lawyer, I said. Talk to Mr. Abernathy. Look, kid, Mr. Sykes spoke up. He had a voice like sandpaper. We can do this the hard way or the easy way. The will is shaky. We can contest the mental capacity of the deceased. We can tie you up in probate for 5 years. The assets will be frozen. You won't be able to pay the taxes. You'll lose the house anyway. It was a bluff. A weak, desperate bluff. Did you read the clause about the defense trust? I asked him. $1 million allocated just to crush you. Do you have $1 million to fight me, Dad? I looked at Garrett. He looked away. And, I continued, did you tell Mr. Sykes about the debt recovery clause? If you file a suit, the estate immediately sues you for the loans. $100,000 plus interest. That's, what? $150,000? Can you write that check today, Dad? Garrett paled. He whispered something to Sykes. Sykes frowned. We just want a settlement, Kendra said, her voice cracking. Rowan, be reasonable. Mom is a mess. She can't handle this humiliation. Just give us the liquid cash. You keep the house. We take the cash. Clean break. No, I said. Why are you being so cruel? Kendra screamed, tears finally spilling over. We're your family. I found my family, I said, thinking of Matilda in the woods. You aren't family. You are people I used to know. Cynthia rolled down the window. She looked 10 years older than yesterday. Her makeup was smeared. I gave you life, she rasped. And you tried to sell mine for a condo development, I replied. Go home, Mom. Go live your life. You have your status. You have your friends. You just don't have my money. You're a monster, she whispered. I'm the owner, I corrected. I looked at Garrett. Dad, take her home. Garrett looked at me. For a second, I saw regret. Deep, profound regret. He knew he had chosen the wrong side. He had bet on the tyrant and lost the daughter. Goodbye, Rowan, he said softly. Goodbye, Dad. They got back in the car. The SUV turned around, tires kicking up dust. I watched them drive away until they were just a speck on the horizon. I stood there for a long time. The wind rustled the dry leaves around my feet. It was over. The fear, the obligation, the guilt, it all drove away with that car. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy skeleton key Elias had given me. There was a secondary lock on the gate, a heavy deadbolt that hadn't been used in years. I slid the key in. It fit perfectly. With a solid, satisfying thunk, I turned it. Locked. I wasn't locking myself in. I was locking the toxicity out. I walked back up the driveway. The house looked different now. It didn't look looming or cold. It looked, waiting. It was a canvas, and I was finally the artist. Later that afternoon, Matilda came up to the main house. We walked through the garden. The winter was coming, but I saw signs of life. We should plant snowdrops, Matilda said, pointing to a patch of bare earth near the wall. They bloom in the snow. They're stubborn. Like us. I'd like that, I said. We knelt in the dirt, digging small holes for the bulbs. The soil was cold, but it felt good. It felt real. I touched the bandage on my cheek where the ring had cut me. It still throbbed a little, a reminder of the price I had paid. But as I looked at Matilda, and then up at the library window where Silas used to sit, I knew it was a bargain. I had lost a family that never loved me. But I had gained a legacy, a sister in spirit, and most importantly, I had found my own voice. I wasn't the shadow anymore. I was the Blackwood. So, my parents are now claiming I stole their retirement plan and have turned the rest of the extended family against me. I know I followed my grandfather's wishes, but looking at my mother's tears, a small part of me wavers. So, am I the jerk for keeping every cent of the $15.5 million and locking my family out of the estate? Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more family drama stories. What would you have done if you were in Rowan's shoes? Let me know in the comments below.